Well, I don't think you negotiate with the groups we have over here. I think you kill them and you take the young ones and you remove all the brainwashing.
These terror groups are much more integrated and federated than the governments.
What is lacking in the DRC situation is Kinshasa's political will. And that's something that Trump can sway.
Hello, folks. My name is Robert Kabushenga, the bad native from Kampala, and I'm very happy to see you guys this week. First of all, shout out to Sheila Kangwaje in Kampala, Uganda, someone I know very well, but someone who lives her life with the bad natives. She never misses an episode. She comments, she shares it with everybody, especially those she hates. I know she does that with a passion. And I need to remind you, please follow us on X, subscribe on YouTube and elsewhere else where you pick your podcasts. It is Bad Natives Podcast. So it's happy to be with you again this week.
Hi guys, my name is Adesua Giwa Sage and I am out of Abuja and welcome to the show.
I am Charles Onyango Obo in Nairobi, and today we are glad to have a guest. He's Gatete Nyiringabo. He is from he's calling in from Kigali. Gatete is famous for having you know what shall controversial views. He's a troublemaker, but he's a lawyer and activist and a blogger. So if he gets in the zone, he's a very interesting man. So welcome, Gatete.
Thank you.
Finally, Adesua has an age mate. So it's not.
And
It's
no,
not
no, no,
just us.
you know.
It's not just us old guys imposing our views, but also to let you know that this week Furio is traveling, so she's not able to be with us. But otherwise, she would. She's our bad native from Johannesburg in South Africa. So, guys, the three big issues out of Africa for us this week: our airlines and why are airlines important. We'll come back to that later, and then, of course, standby force for West Africa. But the place to start is the big news that came out of Washington, D.C. President Trump, at a ceremony, presided over a ceremony of an agreement, a peace agreement between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is curious and want to find out more. What was that all about? Of course, it comes against the background of the military progress made by M23 in capturing a lot of territory in Eastern Congo, but also the decision by the Democratic Republic of Congo to allow the US access to rare minerals. It's a big story. Everywhere you look at it, the stakes are high. If there is any one person who understands the dynamics of this, it is Gatete, our man Gatete in Kigali. Gatete, I'm going to start with the thing that I want you to help me to understand. First of all, has there been war between DR Congo and Rwanda? And if they're signing this agreement, what is all of this about? What's the background? What just bring us up to date. What is this all about?
There's been two wars in the span of 30 years already, as you know.
Oh.
But there have been ongoing skirmishes along the border between Rwanda and the DRC every day, to this day, In the capital of Goma, there were bombs that fell on the Rwandan territory. We had, during Chogam, actually, we had FDLR crossing the border into Rwanda, into districts of Kinigi and Rubavu, killing people, destroying property. So skirmishes are ongoing permanently because FDLR's purpose is to return to Rwanda, create chaos or insecurity in Rwanda. So skirmishes are permanent, but that is on the front, on the war front. But diplomatically, it's open war because people expect war to be just a war of bullets, but diplomatically we have no mutual embassies; they are shut down. Our airline cannot fly not only in the DRC, but it cannot even fly our civilian airline, Rwanda, that you'll be discussing aviation shortly. But our civilian airline, Rwanda and Congo is a massive landmass. Rwanda can fly over the Congolese territory, so it has to do a contour. It cannot land in Kinshasa, obviously. We have Congolese politicians, ministers going across the world asking for people we have partnerships with to Arsenal, football clubs, Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich. They have written to all of them asking them to stop the partnership they have with Visit Rwanda. They have, as you know, they have gone to the UN and the EU and everywhere to ask for sanctions against Rwanda. So yeah, so diplomatically there is open war. On the ground there are some skirmishes that are ongoing on a permanent basis. So yes, Rwanda and DRC are at war.
So what happened in Washington, D.C.?
To stop all that. They signed to stop all that. Because what causes that? The reason that you have skirmishes at the border is because the FDLR, which is a movement, I will explain in this group. FDLR
Yes.
is a movement of people who committed the genocide in Rwanda, then went to DRC, and they went with a huge amount of civilians, refugees. And because it was the only way they could protect themselves. So they shielded themselves with millions of Rwandans. Took them to what you know as the Mugunga camps and all these other camps. But then they wanted to make Rwanda ungovernable, so they would do incursions at night. You both of you, I suspect you covered that. And then until one day Rwanda went in and repatriated the civilians.
Right.
That
was in 1997.
97, yeah. Congo war number one. But the killers, they some of them were repatriated. Many of them escaped and went deep into the Congo. Some people say they are old now, but that's not what they do. They are old. They're as old as Kagame. Saying FDLR is old is like saying the RPF is old. The RPF, it's like saying the NRM is old, or these.
Let's leave that one.
Basically, they have gone to the DRC. Some of their leaders are old, but they have children and grandchildren that they recruit into these movements. So they have 3 generations of fighters that have the same ideology. So FDLR is an ideology. It's not a human being, and it's a genocide ideology. The purpose is to one day return to Rwanda and finish the job, as they say, of killing two. That's what they sworn to achieve. So now, since Congo,
so help us understand what has the Congolese government got to do with these chaps?
So now the chaps get into the Kivu. See, the Kivus again will tell me that I'm trying to be provocative, but the Kivus are like Kabare and Kisoro. They are people. People speaking Rwanda live there.
Yes.
So just like they live in Karagwe and all these sides towards Arusha in Tanzania, so the Rwandophones are just like any other community. This gentleman called Onyango, if he tells you he's called Onyango and he's from Uganda, you'll be surprised because most Onyangos we know live in Kenya. So, and so on and so forth. So when they got to that region, they found many Tutsis. And they said, hang on. So they turned against the Tutsis in Congo. Those Tutsis have been in refugee camps in your country. Mainly, most of them are in your country in Uganda, the Tutsi Congolese. and some of them are in Rwanda here, and they've been for 30 years because those genocide perpetrators and their teams and their families and their Rwandans, they chase them from their homestead in Eastern DRC. That's where they live. But the thing is, while they're there, they have been able to cut deals with Congolese leaders from there to mine because they don't have the same livelihood as the Rwandophones who live there. Rwandophones who live there are farmers and cattle keepers. But these guys have displaced them, so they have taken their fields. They do farming and they do artisanal mining, and they do this in partnership with politicians from that region who are based in Kinshasa, the capital city. And during Congo, because the DRC does not have an army, the only movement, because of the many tribes, everything is tribalized in the DRC, so the only group that is organized and structured is the FDLR. So the Kinshasa government uses it. So the Kinshasa government uses it. It's like its special force, it's elite force. It's FDLR is DRC. When you speak to M23, they will tell you the only people we fight with and who try to resist is FDLR. The Congolese army, they run as soon as the first bullet. Because when you come from Kinshasa and you're told to go fight in the east for a war you have no idea at 1,000 kilometers from where you come from, you see no point of fighting. But FDLR is fighting also for its maintenance of that region. So it's much more resilient in fighting than any other Congolese group.
So, Charles, what did Trump achieve? And will he get his Nobel Prize?
And well, probably not. But I mean, he got a good he got good airlines. He needed a win,
Yes.
and this was portrayed as such, which glossed over the fact that actually it's Agatete, correct me if I'm wrong, it is actually not a peace agreement as such, isn't it? It's a framework, kind of a framework document. So the I think that in the news and in the framing of the American media and Trump himself, I think they have oversold. They have oversold it. Um, I think it is important to wait and see what happens in July. I think that is when the presidents would sign something, and it presumes that the Doha talks, which I think involve the M23, will have progressed, and I think the idea is to bring those two processes together, July, in a grand event. If I'm not mistaken. So, but the one of the things about this agreement is it calls for, because the big thing that DRC and its friends have been pushing for is, they say, the Rwandese have 5 to 7,000 troops, and so they have been demanding withdrawal. Now, this agreement calls for Rwanda to end its defensive measures. I think that is, the Rwandese call it more elegantly. They call it their defensive posture, which, which,
It looks like a
which,
phrase created by Gatetti.
But listen,
yeah,
so
I think,
Charles, can I help?
yeah,
Can I come in there?
yeah.
What is a defensive mechanism? Because no one has ever asked. People accuse Rwanda of being in the DRC, and Rwanda says we are not in the DRC. The answer is not. The
Yes.
answer is the reality is probably somewhere in between there. But what is the reality? When Rwanda says it has defensive mechanism, then it goes into the realm of the military. How do you defend your territory? The best way, Israel has been striking Tehran, saying it's doing defensive mechanism. People travel miles and miles and miles away to go conduct defensive mechanism. At least that's how they tell. Rwanda is a small country. We all know. So Rwanda has intelligence. This is what their main defensive mechanism is intelligence, to make sure there is no FDLR threat closer to its border. So Rwanda is a small country, as you all know. A bomb in Gisenyi would devastate economy. For example, the 60% of party goers are going to Gisenyi this weekend because there's a long weekend. And Gisenyi is right at the border with the DRC. So Rwanda not only guards Gisenyi, but it makes sure there's at least 100 kilometers into the Congo where there's no threat to Gisenyi. It doesn't mean they occupy the space because they don't. They don't actually come and have a base. They don't have a base in Congo. They don't have, but they actually go in for operations to eliminate FDLR threat and come back. That's what they call defensive mechanism. Because in the past, it so happened that people used to bomb FDLR does. For example, this year, the year before, and so on, they do bomb all the way from positions in the Congo on Rwandan territory. And that's what Rwanda neutralizes consistently. And that's what they call, the DRC calls it having an army in the DRC. Rwanda calls it operations to defend itself. So that's where the misunderstanding is. Now, sorry.
I was gonna say, did you want to ask me a question before I wanted to respond
No,
to
you
something?
speak. I still have my question, but I didn't want to interfere with what you had to say. So I want you to say it, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking.
Okay. Well, I do think the comparison of Rwanda with Israel is very interesting. And I think that Rwanda likes to lie to itself and the world that it is a small country. Small but mighty is not by landmass. It's not by landmass that makes a country big. The UK or England is a tiny island and they still were able to colonize like 70% of the world. So it's not by landmass that makes a country big or small. I don't think in any like real definition of small that Rwanda counts as a small country. And I find it interesting because that's also what Israel says, right? Israel tries to, state that they are the David fighting the Goliath. But these are significantly powerful countries. They have a significantly powerful security apparatus. They have better security weapons and generally it more work like their government is working, they have more money. So I was just going to say, like, I don't think Rwanda is a small country.
Ah, okay. So the issue I want to bring on the table at this one for you to look at is last week or this week, very recently, in the last couple of days, guess who was in Kigali? Uh, General Olusegun Obasanjo was meeting with President Kagame, and he's now I don't remember the exact technical term, but he's the one in charge of the Luanda process. Luanda being, the capital of Angola. And one of the issues that has come, so that process plus the Nairobi process have been merged, and that's the African process. Now, one of the issues that has come up is that does the agreement undermine the African process? Then we must remember that Qatar also did intervene and cause a meeting between President Kagame and President Tshisekedi of Congo. And the specific question to you is actually two questions. One, why do people keep going back to Obasanjo? I mean, when Ethiopia was at war with itself, they went to Obasanjo. Whatever. So, for some reason, why is he such an attractive uh, interlocutor in all of these things? So that's the first question. The second, more broad question is, do African processes really, really matter in light of how this one has evolved? There were so many failures. Then I'll come back to the issue of the standby force later, but that's where I'd like you to start. What do we need to know about Obasanjo? I mean, why? The guy been around since 71 and in his mid to late 80s. What value does this man bring to the table?
Obasanjo is a living bridge. He has relationships across the continent, significant relationships. One from when he was a soldier. I remember when he was a soldier, he was in Congo as a young man. He formed significant relationships even back then, which even saved his life at one point in time. I spoke to him about that. When he was a general, he also made relationships. Remember, this is ECOMOG era, ECOMOG time. Obasanjo made relationships across Africa. Obasanjo was also the first black man to outside of South Africa to be allowed to visit Nelson Mandela. I think people so like Obasanjo's history is the continental history as well. He very it's forgotten that he tried to become the UN Secretary General. I believe he came third in the race, but he also has
He was also part of the eminent persons on the
yes.
African continent about on South Africa or partly together with the Malcolm Fraser, I think he was called, Australian. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes. So, his network and his relationships with people, and he's been able to maintain these relationships. He's a resource. He's a living resource, a living bridge. He's essentially African history itself. And he's been doing this role of mediating, problems. Even I remember once he talked very casually about something in Sudan and South Sudan, and those people they're going to have to separate or something like that, or maybe they would have like at some point in time, like, but he's that type of person, right? And even as a leader of Nigeria, his main thing coming as our first president outside of the military was to maintain the integrity of Nigeria, to kill any ideas of secessionist movements, and to kill any ideas of military coming back into power. So I mean, there are many reasons why Obasanjo would be the person playing this role. He's done it for a very long time, and he's still very energetic. So I'm
Oh,
not surprised.
so but that then begs the question that I raised earlier on, which is you have people like Obasanjo on the continent, and I could name a couple of others on the continent. Why do we fail to initiate processes that can outlast? I mean, even the one that you negotiated with to end the civil war in Ethiopia is sort of also. How come the other world powers or middle powers are able to have greater effect in terms of leveraging Africans, but people like Obasanjo? Is it because it doesn't have state backing? What is it about us, our processes?
One, I would say there is the problem of a lack of state backing. There's a problem. There's also a problem here where it's like, what do you get in return? Because with this DRC Rwanda deal, we see that minerals are going to go one way and dollars are going to come one way, right? They're not just brokering peace based off of them being able to broker it. Qatar and America are able to offer things that possibly other African heads of states can't in terms of money. But I also think there is because I also spoke about how when the whole issue happened with the coup in Niger and Tinubu's posturing, how a lot of people were like, why didn't he use Obasanjo? Why didn't he use Abdul Salami? Like, these are people who have brokered agreements across the continent, and these are people who have relationships in these different regions and in these different countries. And that is a very good question. Is why wouldn't you use the people you have and back them? And I think it's possibly the insecurities of our African leaders. I think we do have a lot of, maybe they prefer white people or Oyimbos as we call them here. I don't know, but it's just the energy with which they move with their elders is not how they should be moving with their elders, I think.
Thing that's going on in my mind is, Charles, you said this was more of a framework which should then govern the the peace process, or rather, what should lead to some kind of peace agreement. What is interesting is that the M23 and Kabila, the former president, have rejected this thing out of hand, presumably and more predictably because they were not a part of it. By the way, our chief of defense forces did tweet after a visit to to DRC in Kinshasa, meeting President Tshisekedi. He posted on his account that Kabila was not welcome in Uganda, is not liked in Uganda, and should not be anywhere in the vicinity of Uganda, basically. And so, therefore, for me, means that Uganda clearly has thrown its lot with DRC. I can't get over what you said last week. That, we like to eat from both sides. As Uganda, we like, and then I added that we eat from both sides of the mouth. Are we trying to eat from the M23 side and from the Congo side? Just tell me about Uganda's position there.
Well, Uganda's position draws attention to some of the loopholes in this agreement, because the argument has been made that whichever way you cut it, you do not resolve the issues of the DRC if it doesn't include, well, Rwanda is in, but you can't leave out Burundi and Uganda, because Burundi has as many troops inside there as Uganda does. So that any agreement which doesn't include them is probably won't go far. So in many ways you could see there Uganda asking for a place at the table. Mm. And will probably, that is where these things will have to end. But then they because what Uganda did is that in the North Kivu, it's moved a little bit. Uh, it moved its presence a bit deeper in northern Kivu. So what has that done? That now you are not going to resolve the issues of the fate of the Kivus without Kampala's say.
Ah,
Yeah. So
okay.
that is one of the things. But probably, um, the Doha process might introduce language or ideas that bring those kind of actors in. But the second thing, Bob, is and I think the thing you mentioned, that if you leave, it doesn't matter. Um, if M23 is not in on this early stage, where does it end? So you know what happened after the signing?
No.
Um, Kinshasa bombed, sent planes and bombed. I think one of the locations of M23. And I think yesterday the M23 issued a very ominous statement, saying, "Look, what does it mean if 2 days after the signing of this thing you have this attack, and if if they are not careful, this whole process could easily be invalidated over the next few days."
But Charles, just tell Adesua how many, it's been reported, how many fighting groups are there in Eastern Congo?
They those which have the ability to inflict harm, I think there are like 140 of them. But if you put all organized group in, including others which only have clubs, they are about 200. So uh, so so essentially this process speaks to M23 AFC, but that leaves 199 uh, movements out.
So,
But there are people who argue in there are some people who argue in Kigali that, oh, it doesn't matter, or all the other 199 are represented by the Kinshasa government.
OM23. So, okay. So, so they are a creation of, their proxies of different interests in Congo. But I guess, like Gatete said earlier on, that they are also a reflection of the ethnic composition of the Eastern Congo, and as such present a complex situation. Again, I go back to you, Adesua, in terms of similarities. I mean, you spoke to the earlier similarity of Rwanda, positioning itself as some sort of Israel. But one of the similarities is the proliferation of fighting groups over private fighting groups over a large expanse of land. How does that, one, undermine the state? Most importantly for me, in light of those freelance groups, as I call them, who do you actually negotiate with? Because here, what you have is a framework between Rwanda and DRC. But how do you integrate these fighting groups? In West Africa, there is even no interlocutor in terms of a state that you could say is on the other side of the rebels. Maybe Chad could be one of those countries that people negotiate with. But then how do you bring these people in? But also the similarities go a bit further. Also in the area we're talking about in West Africa, you have rare metals, again at the center of and your powers. So what do the lessons of what Trump has done with Congo, how can those lessons be applied in West Africa? That's for me an interesting set of circumstances.
Well, I don't think you negotiate with the groups we have over here. I think you kill them and you take the young ones and you remove all the brainwashing. I don't think you negotiate with JNM and ISSP and ISWAP and Boko Haram. You don't negotiate with them. And even Chad, because Chad is fighting Boko Haram seriously. I don't think anybody will be on the side of these groups, especially because we're talking about proliferation of terror and we're talking about Islamic jihadists primarily. There is an element that's a very important element that we have that just goes beyond militias fighting over resources. Maybe it's the bandits you can negotiate with, because those are essentially militias fighting over resources, whether it's land, whether it's cows, or whether it is where we have these minerals. But for the most part, the terrorists, no, you don't negotiate with them, right? And that's why I think President Tinubu has tried to take a stand essentially with ECOWAS and the standing force, right? Is trying to impress upon ECOWAS the need for us to have a standing force as terror spreads in the Sahel. And it seems that a lot of countries are not doing a very good job keeping the terrorists down or keeping them within their borders. Even in the last week, I've seen Mali able to get some significant wins against JNIM in the past week. I've seen reports of some significant losses in the side of the terrorists rather than on the side of the Malian soldiers. But I don't think the lesson we should take from here is to negotiate. I think the lesson, I'm not entirely sure what the lesson would be for West Africa, because we also
I
don't
think
have cross border issues in terms of governments against each other.
I think the lesson so far, now come to Charles, to come back to your this point, is that the other regions in Africa, aware of these threats, did come up with something called a standby force. So, Charles, first educate us. What is a standby force, and which parts of Africa have been able to put together this kind of arrangement, either as a deterrent or as an actual. I mean, we saw what happened in Mozambique when some jihadist groups came in and so on. So just talk to us. What's a standby force, and then how do the militaries organize themselves on that issue?
The idea actually is one of those things that came from the African Union a while back. That along with the regional economic blocs, you would build a regional security mechanism which brings together, the armies of the region to coordinate the activities. So um, all the regions have either some process which has started or is as advanced halfway. But I think the most advanced of them all has to be the East African Standby Force, because that one they hold regular exercises and things like that. They have officers going to each other's defense colleges in fairly large numbers. They have very, very good intelligence sharing, in East Africa, around terrorism and things like that. And you could see that, that was the framework which was supposed to intervene in the Congo, but because of, for example, the disagreements between Kinshasa and Rwanda couldn't contribute troops to that. Uganda couldn't because Uganda already had a parallel process in in the Congo. But the East African one is actually pretty much advanced, and the logic you can see it in West Africa, because increasingly these you know rebel groups and jihadist group, virtually all of them have a regional character. They operate across borders. So if you see the ADF, which Uganda has been fighting, it's now linked to the groups in Somalia. It is associated with the group in Mozambique. So it reminds me of a story. The former and late deputy prime minister in Uganda, Ria Kategaya, when he was talking about the need for East African Federation, he said that on Lake Victoria, uh, the the thieves who steal the boats, had already formed a federation. that so they had such a good federation. They are able to steal a boat in Kisumu and ensure it's in Mwanza the following day. They are able to steal a boat in Mwanza and ensure ends up in Uganda. So he said the criminals are are uh, they have federated, yes, and that the governments are behind them. So on this issue, actually, it is the same. These terror groups are much more integrated and federated than the governments. So, i-
Yes.
so in that sense, actually, Tinubu for once is making sense, but that you must confront these people regionally. But there's a lot of pettiness in West Africa, by the way, because a
Yes.
lot of the reservation is that there is this big country, not on this issue,
On this issue, they don't
that
want a
that uh,
standing
that
force.
uh, that Nigeria will dominate. So just these groups are rampant, and these guys are there quibbling about the fact that Nigeria is overbearing.
No, it's
Let me come
ridiculous,
to
right? Oh, I was just going to say it's
our.
ridiculous because when it comes to the funding, the suggestion is that the funding should be more equal and the troops sent should be more equal, but they want to keep it as multinational joint task forces rather than a standing force. And I don't understand. It's not our fault we are big.
You said it's not geographical, but let me come to let me come back to Gatete. Gatete, one of the things that was hanging before we lost you, but now you're back, is so where does that leave the groups that are aggrieved politically, either as fighting groups, M23 being one of them, or those that are aggrieved politically, best represented by now the new sentiments by Joseph Kabila. And I told the guys earlier on that in fact the Ugandan CDF did tweet that Kabila is unwelcome in the precinct, and so anywhere near Uganda he is not welcome. That's after he met with Chisekedi. So there are a number of contradictions. You leave out the groups that are actually fighting on the ground, but you want to go with the country you accuse of, because you don't want to accept that this country that you have contradictions. So you say the fighters are the Rwanda army. Then there is the contradiction of Uganda. One day you have statements in support of M23. One day you have statements in support of Rwanda. Then the next day you're
Please
talking about
disregard the tweet. Please
Kinshasa.
disregard the tweets. I'm not even sure it.
Go ahead, sir.
I don't think that is the Twitter handle of the CDS of Uganda. I do not believe that's the case. I don't not even believe that is. Disregard that. That's a parody account. We all know parody accounts. Don't bring it into this. Don't bring it into this conversation
I have.
because it will lower
Okay.
it will lower the quality of the conversation we are having here on bad natives. It's a parody account, so disregard that. In Rwanda, we the kind of thing we
Okay.
send each other to laugh. It's not something. It's not policy. It's not geopolitics. It's buffoonery. Disregard that. Now let's come back to the issue.
Yes.
No armed group. There are 150 that can, for example, last week they killed 800 people in Tanganyika region, one of those armed groups. So the killings are massive in the DRC. But also the DRC doesn't care because if the DRC reported the mass killings that are committed by all these movements, it would be self-indicting. So they only accuse M23, they speak of M23, but M23 is the most peaceful group in the DRC. If you, by any metric that you see, if you go, even Human Rights Watch, they have this, what they call the Kivu security, uh, I think, security tracker or something like that. It will show you that M23, even the allegations, not even confirmed killings, even the allegations, M23 is the most peaceful. It's more peaceful than even the Congolese army, which commits also many exactions. But none of these groups have been left behind. What the DRC government did is to take all the hundreds of groups and put them together and call them native, bad native, actually. They call them Wazalendo. Because Wazalendo, which means true citizens, as opposed to non-citizens, which is M23. If you see what what the
Yes.
semantics are there. So there's every group, there's only one group in the DRC that has political requests. All these other groups have no political requests.
Grievances.
M23 says, M23 is like RPF. It says it's fighting for the Congolese Tutsi in exile to return home that have been in exile for 30 years. So that's what they want. They want that to return. But the other vigilantes, they say we are defending ourselves against the next ethnic group. So there's, because the DRC is a mosaic of ethnic groups. So every ethnic group has a small vigilante type of tribal movement, but they don't have political grievances. And another thing is that they do not take territory. So now the Congolese government thought it can use all these groups against M23, and which is what it has done by grouping all of them together, arming all of them, and repurposing them, giving them a new name, Wazalendo, which means real citizens, because they say the Congolese,
Those who are born here.
yeah, those were born here. But the Congolese Tutsi, just like the Rwandan Tutsi actually, were treated as stateless, as non-belonging, and so on. This is true in Rwanda and in DRC. I'm so glad it's not the case in Uganda, but or in Tanzania, and in Burundi, it's been the case in the DRC for a long time. So that's one thing. And the other thing, Charles, one of the biggest wins of Donald Trump, I must concede, is that the only thing that is lacking in the DRC is not the well-phrased details of the agreement or the number of people who are on the table or the letter of the text and so on. What is lacking in the DRC situation is Kinshasa's political will. And that's something that Trump can sway. If Trump sways, because anything in the DRC, I mean, experts, people who write good agreements are there. And we've written much better agreements before. What has been lacking in any agreement, by the way, it's not only this one, is political will. With political will, we don't even need an agreement. People can just stop the next day. So Trump's win is to sway Kinshasa. No, in Kinshasa, the Congolese polity in Kinshasa, they still have a grudge against Rwanda and our campaigns in the DRC in the last 30 years. They still have a grudge that the Rwandan became Army Chief of Staff of the DRC. Afande Kabarebe. Um, they have those types of grudges. I think, and that's what makes them not amenable to negotiate with anyone who speaks Kinyarwanda. Also, Kinshasa is farther to Eastern DRC than Mombasa. It's like, so to put Adesua in context here, it's if I go from here to Abuja with a car, I will arrive before I go from here to Kinshasa with a car. That's how far it is. And that's in one country. So where you are now, I could come visit you now, and someone goes visit a friend of his in Kinshasa from Goma, from the DRC, from Eastern DRC. And the person will reach you before they reach someone in Kinshasa. So to them, it's just like Maputo and Cabo Delgado, for those who know Mozambique. You fly and go, to a different time zone. So this, as a result, they do not expect, they do not feel the war, they do not know about the war. Anything goes in Kinshasa. Rwandans have invaded our country to steal our minerals. Also, this issue of minerals. When you discuss, sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish that.
When you
Because then I want
discuss
to
with someone who lives in a
bring.
country of rent seekers, so if you live with someone who lives in a country where the state's main source of income is rent, that means oil, gas, gold, platinum, they cannot conceive that a country can develop without minerals. They just can't. They were born like that, they grew up like that. They believe that countries should live off of rent. People from countries. DRC is the champion in rent seeking. As a result, they cannot conceive that a road is started and finished, or a stadium is built from beginning to start, or an airport is built without rents. And they believe, just like the Maasais believe that all the cattle belongs to them, all of us have stolen them from the Maasais. The Congolese also believe all the minerals belong to them, and all of us, first of all, we cannot live without the minerals, and second, we have stolen all the minerals from them. So these two things are very easy to float in Kinshasa, and all politicians have been elected on that ticket. So once you're a politician and you're elected on a ticket that if they elect you, which is what Tshisekedi was elected upon, if you elect me, I will attack Rwanda. It's difficult for you to sell a peace deal in a situation like that because you are elected on a warmongering slogan. So that's also the other problem. Even though he might sign some of these papers, it will be difficult to make the people in Kinshasa swallow the peace pill because that's not what he campaigned on.
Right. One of the things that you raised, Gatete, and I'm saying this to bring in this over here, is that Rwanda Air is not allowed to fly Congo, which of course increases the distance of its flights to West Africa. And that raises a bigger question for me is that one of the strategic things we should do is to improve aviation in Africa because that's how we can get more better connectivity, not just better connectivity, but translate the whole Africa free trade area into reality. If you have, I mean, Charles, ever since I started having public debates with Charles, one of his pet subjects is why do African countries have visa requirements to enter each other's countries? Why do we have work permit requirements? But the bigger question for me is why is it impossible to fly across Africa? And that then brings in the viability of African airlines. So very quickly, Adesua, before I know you want to go away, a question for you is how is the aviation industry faring within Nigeria? Because I know that it has a very vibrant Nigeria has a very vibrant domestic aviation sector compared to its international one, actually. I think there's two planes taking off from Murtala Mohammed for domestic flights every 2 hours. So please tell us, what can we learn from? And by the way, just while you ask it, what happened to Arik?
Okay. First, I have a question for you, but before I ask it, because after this I'm gonna have to head out. But I have never seen you in a suit and tie. Where are we going? Where are we going today? Oh my God.
all I all I can tell you,
Yeah.
is that it has to do with money. Has to do with
Okay,
money.
okay, okay, okay.
So
Of course it
I
does.
must look the parts.
Of course, of course. Now, there's probably more than two planes leaving every hour. Actually, at MMA domestic, we have two terminals now, and it's very vibrant, as you said, and to the point where actually I am currently looking for a ticket to go to Lagos tomorrow, and I'm very worried because I haven't found one yet, even though there's at least it's 7 or 8 flights to choose from. And so it also shows that people are flying in between Lagos and Abuja, Lagos and Port Harcourt, Uyo, Ibom Airlines. Now, the thing about it is, all these successes are because it is private owned. The most important thing is that you have a regulator that does not hinder private businesses from growing. What you do not want is government to enter, because in the same Nigeria they tried to do Nigeria Air or Nigeria Airways. I think we rented a plane from Rwanda and painted Nigeria Air on it. They went and they did a ceremony. They poured water on it. They brought fire trucks, and then that was it. Billions gone.
Was it Tinubu
It
again?
was Buhari. It was Buhari and his people.
Okay.
But it was a huge scandal, and like they were like, we spent billions and billions of Nigerian air. Nobody has ever seen a plane take off. No one has ever seen the airline, and so they rented a plane from I think Rwanda, and they were like, here you go, the plane.
We have relaunched Nigeria
The
Airways.
plane did a few turns
Wow.
on the on the tarmac, and that was it. But so what you need is not government. You need environment that is positive for businesses to enter. And some of the airlines, you have people who have been successful in other businesses, then go and explore the airline industry. Maybe they've been good at. There's a bet. One of our huge bet guys is now who owns an airline. Some of the we have Ibom Air, which is actually state owned by Akwa Ibom State. But a lot of these things are from successful private individuals finding an environment that they can thrive in. So I would say that it's mostly that. Yeah, I do have to go now. My parting shot. I'm
Do,
gonna give my parting
yeah.
shot before I leave, because it's for a very special German man who's the German consul general in Lagos. Because he basically at this ECOWAS meeting recently that we had recently, he was begging African countries to not trust Russia and specifically to not trust Putin. And, there's been a lot of talk about the standing force. Are we going to get a standing force? Are we going to have this? And he's like, please don't rely on Russia. Don't trust Russia. Putin is playing a game of power and resources. And I just found it so interesting because I think we're finding unusual allies now. Netherlands returned our Bini bronzes last week. The Germans are the Germans are like, guys, we're on your side. I think as the world is coming to shape up, I think we'll find interesting allies even in the smaller Western countries. But that's my parting shot, and that's all I have for you today.
It's not surprising that Elizabeth Warren and Elon Musk are now on the same side of the US budget. Ha!
Bro,
Who would
if
have
Elon
guessed?
Musk gets deported, I will throw a party.
To South
I
Africa.
will throw a party,
And,
and we will all fly out to South Africa to greet him. I think it would be necessary. I think.
and, and the boss said he's turning torch on him. It's a monster, it can eat you.
Mhm.
So anyway, okay, so I'll just stay with these guys and we'll sort of start
I have to
winding
go
up
to National Assembly
on
now to go meet all the lovely people there.
Grit Grit
She's
Natasha.
still suspended.
Tell her we want to host
They arraigned her just on Monday for another case. So
her. Okay.
wonderful. Bye.
All
Okay,
right. Bye.
wonderful.
So I come to you, Gatete. I've spoken about this elsewhere, but Rwanda built an airline from nothing to where it is today. And now there is a collaboration with Qatar on expanding the airport, and Rwanda wants to be the aviation hub. What lessons can Rwanda offer oh, okay, Charles, we've dropped Gatete and we'll get him back. But to you, I guess the story of Ethiopian Airlines and how Kenya Airways was able to turn it around. What do we get from those guys?
Uh, it is, you know, um, Ethiopian Airlines just built, it built um, a new headquarters, a big fancy headquarters, just a few years ago. I don't know if even it's 5 years, but the thing is that at that point, Ethiopia, it was a very profitable uh, headline, but it is headquarters wouldn't even qualify to be a substation for some of the other money losing airlines. So so they really have they are a very well. It's well managed. It is it's not, it doesn't splash and it doesn't do these grand things, and you know that has kept it. So you know these other airlines, you know, you rarely see Prime Minister Abiy arriving in a country for a visit with the whole plane carrying 20 people and causing scheduling chaos at home. The problem with these other
Yep.
airlines is that the airline is partly a matatu for the government or the first family. So if two family members travel, the airline loses half its capacity. those are the things those are the things that brought Air Zimbabwe down, and you're beginning to see it in some of these other you know countries. So it's
So
but over to to Gatete, maybe you
yeah, Gatete was telling you that Rwanda built an airline from nothing, and as it's building an airport, wants to be the hub. What what lessons do they give to our other airlines? We really, I mean, Rwanda is a landlocked country and it needs connectivity. This continent needs to connect through aviation.
But it's we have that's one of the grudges we have with our region, right? Because Rwanda has been the difference between Rwanda and Ethiopia. There are countries that actively sabotage Rwanda, so the DRC being one of them, but Uganda is another one. Uganda, Burundi, Uganda in particular. Uganda,
Eh,
I will develop that why. I'll give you facts and then I'll tell you what I think my analysis is. So, for example, there's what they
sure.
call fifth freedom. Fifth freedom, that means you are allowed to go in the country and establish a base there where people can buy your ticket from the same country and you take passengers from that country and take them to destinations. We don't have such base in this region. Our next base is in Benin, because no country in this region could allow us to have fifth freedom. They allow Qatar Airlines, Turkish Airlines, Ethiopian Airlines, but not Rwanda Air. So Rwanda Air, for example, cannot go to Kampala, and people coming from Kampala as their first takeoff, it has to be a Rwanda that came from Kigali with people going to Uganda. These people come out, and then new passengers come in, and it continues. But it cannot be a base where Rwanda can have planes because Uganda has denied this right to Rwanda. Another profitable line was Kinshasa to Brussels. The Kampala London is a very good, lucrative line, but I'm sure it's owned by, I don't even look. It's probably owned by Qataris and Turkish and Emiratis, but not Rwanda. Same with the DRC. Kinshasa has refused to give. Rwanda cannot. Not only can Rwanda not even use that route anymore, we can't even fly the airspace. Burundi is,
Yeah.
so the only, actually, in this region, in this East Africa, our best friend is South Sudan, because we even have a contract to transport their president. So this is our. So you can see that. So Rwanda is not only the airline. Africa, our best friends in Africa, you'll be surprised, are from West Africa. We have very good relationships with West Africa than with the rest, than with East Africa in this region we are in. And now we have a problem with South Africa down there, but it's the only. It's actually in Southern Africa. It's South Africa that is isolated. It is not us because we are friends with Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, obviously, and so that we have managed to maintain more friends than enemies in the SADC. But we used to have a problem also in the SADC. Tanzania, it's our friend 1 month and it's our 1 year and it's our enemy the next. So we also have issues with that. So we don't have fifth freedom. We cannot transport people as their first journey in Tanzania. We cannot do that in Uganda. We cannot do that in DRC. We can only do that in Burundi and South Sudan. So that's to show you that, this thing you talk about Africa and Pan-Africanism, and we have, when we tell you stories about this region, it's been quite an interesting region that we have. Why? Because we are a small country, and politicians of this region think that our very existence is an indictment to their shortcomings, and they think it can destabilize. And you would see that, and you'll see people saying, if Rwanda did it, why can't we do it? If you see on Twitter, if Rwanda opened a new public garden, the comments of Kenyans and Tanzanians and Ugandans and Congolese will be, but why did Rwanda open and garden and there's no garden in the roundabout in Mpererwe or Bugolobi? That kind of thing. So this is the kind of thing that has been very difficult for us to handle with our airline.
It was saying that to fly from Berlin to Istanbul costs $150. To fly from Kinshasa to Lagos costs 850. So what?
Why are you going very far? Nairobi to
Yeah,
Entebbe
Nairobi to Kampala. So I think that one of the things that is problem for this African airline is that the taxes are simply prohibitive. Most of that price are taxes, and I think it comes from a certain there is class warfare in travel. The assumption that people who travel are privileged or have a lot of money, so so you extort them, and that they can take they can take the pain. So by the time you add up the costs on a ticket, it is most of the cost is not the ticket itself, it is the taxes. The same thing with fuel, because people who have cars probably are rich, so you shake them down. You take money out of their pockets through extortionate taxes, and I think it's just not good for the law. And but then the other thing that Gatete touched on is the African Union has all of these open air, open skies program, very idealistic, and if you look at the numbers, Bob, I think they said that if the 12 leading economies in Africa had open skies, it would generate annually about 1.5 trillion dollars in business, which no one is making now. And I mean, simply incredible. But so you still have this silly thing. If I'm going to Tororo from Nairobi, and I want to do it quickly, it's easier and even cheaper to drive. Now you ask yourself, if Wilson Airport, by the way, has it's the busiest airport in Africa, not even that Nigerian one. There every few minutes you have planes leaving. But it is possible to have a service which starts from here, stops in Tororo. I get there in 20, 30 minutes. It goes to Soroti. So why do we all have to go to Entebbe? So I think that once we overcome those kind of, if we can end the kind of idiocy we have in place today, I mean, things will just bubble up and zoom, and we'll be in a good place.
Okay, Charles, I think I don't want to add to the stories. Let's do our event of the week. For me, Charles, my event of the week just has to be Faith Kipyegon. I mean, really? For those, man, for those who don't
She
know,
tried.
yes, the fact that so Faith Biegun wanted to be the first woman to break the mile barrier, 4 minute barrier on the mile, the Roger Bannister issue and Chariots of Fire. The fact that she took on the challenge alone was for me whatever credit, commended. But Charles, what caught my eye was to see her at the center of all these athletic men. And she was the star of this running and the pace. And she was giving as good as she got. In fact, for me, I think that she slowed down when the pace setters left and moved off. But otherwise, as long as she was with the men, she was giving as good as she got. So, Gatete, quickly, please don't switch off when we wind up. You found us winding up, so you leave your open so that it can download. But what we do here is we ask you to tell us what is your event of the week from the continent. And I was telling Charles that mine is from Faith Kipyegon, the Kenyan runner, female runner who tried to break the 4 minute barrier for the mile, and that's for me. That's why I was saying to see her with those men, and they were moving and she was pacing, and they were moving and she was with them toe to toe until the last 100 meters when they dropped off, and you could see that's when she dropped the speed. So that for me was the event of the week. Yeah, yours, Yatete.
Unfortunately, it's not a happy one. Sorry.
You're Rio African.
Please do invite me again. I don't want to leave. You know, after the negotiations in the United States, after the Washington D.C. signing, the next day Kinshasa bombed the Banyamulenge positions of M23, and this complicates things. So my event of the week would have been the negotiations in Doha that I look forward to between M23 and the DRC. But they are off to a bad start because of the bombing of the Banyamulenge community in Uvira, in Minembwe, 2 days ago. But still, it doesn't discourage me from hoping that the negotiations between M23 and the Congolese government will be an exciting thing to watch. That's my.
Charles,
Yeah.
you wind it up.
Mine is it's neither happy nor is it grim, but South Africa, depending on which reports you look at, has the highest unemployment rate, in Africa, or at least of any of the continent's leading economies. So the South African police put out an advertisement for 5,500 new trainees. In the first 24 hours, they received 67,000 applications. So, I mean,
How long was the application?
so the application is open up to July 18th. By that time, they will looking into hundreds. They might even end up with, and they put this, it's online, they might end up with over 200,000 applications. In fact, those first 24 hours were so much, they the the website basically froze. But it is also but it's a sad story that, I mean, it's a very sad statistic, which shows just how much the ANC and those people really have to do for that country. It's a lot of work.
Right. Thank you, Tete. Thank you, Charles.